Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee, host of the podcast Escaping Rock Bottom, here with a great episode coming your way. Josh Anderson, he is a therapist over at Calvary Healing Center. Calvary Healing Center, a longtime partner of mine, both on the podcast, but also here at Art of Our Soul, where we do a lot of art healing with their residential patients who are trying to get sober. Josh is on the podcast. Josh, it's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. So before we get into the whole, you're a therapist at Calvary Healing Center, which by the way is a great treatment center. Been around, I want to say, for like 50 years.
Yeah, almost 60 now, I think.
60 years
Yeah,
here
right?
in the Valley. I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah.
Because if you look around the landscape, a lot of times treatment centers are new. I just feel like they're just a lot of new ones, maybe like been open for like 5 years.
At least, yeah.
And it really says something in the mental health field when somebody has a foundation like Calvary where they've been around for like almost 60 years or 60 years.
Yeah.
I got to ask Ramson, like, what is the exact date? Before we get into all of that, because I'm a huge fan of Calvary. I refer people to Calvary because I believe in the program.
Sure.
And, sometimes it's interesting. There are the really bougie places out there, and, Sabino Recovery is one of them.
Yes.
You got the promises, what the society thinks of that. But I like to tell people, too, that while some of them can be great, you don't have to go to a bougie treatment center in order to really heal. As a matter of fact, I have actually referred wealthy people
Sure.
to a place like Calvary because you know what? Sometimes they need that shit stripped down in order to heal.
Yeah.
Right? In order to heal this. So we'll get to all that. Josh, tell me a little bit about you. Where were you born and raised?
Born and raised in St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Okay.
Typical mid-class, white, suburban, everything but the white picket fence, right? Childhood was very normal. We moved a lot, I guess, was what would be the only standout. And so when I look back, to my childhood, there is no one thing that I can pinpoint as to like, where did the road just go?
That's fascinating to me because, I think for most, and I would never want to say for all because I think that that's not fair, but I think for most of us, I'm a huge believer that unhealed trauma is really the gateway to addiction. For most.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, and I look at, and everybody who listens to this podcast knows, mine was a lot of abuse, right? A lot of abuse as a child that sent me astray at age 15.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't just randomly sit there and go, oh, you guys are doing what? Okay, can I try? Like, I did those things, but I also had so much trauma that happened to you. So let me ask you this. When did the life of Josh start to go off the rails if you didn't have anything memorable in your mind as traumatic as a child?
Yeah. So, and obviously after getting my education and recovery and professionally looking back, I can see some neglect, right? I was responsible for getting myself up and ready for school in second grade, off to the school bus. When I came home from school, I was alone. Parents had to work. But that's just how things were. And I look back in any of my therapy I've been, age 8 sticks out a lot. And I think it taught me a lot of independence, but however, some of that was a isolationism kind of thing where I just handled my own shit. And so I guess I was in middle school the first time I smoked weed. And it was one of those things where some of the older guys in the neighborhood that I looked up to were doing. And so, yeah, I want to try it. And I can see how, when I used to smoke weed, I was less anxious. I was less jealous. I was less everything. And that just skyrocketed into my number one coping mechanism for everything. The girl that I had a crush on who didn't pay attention to me like I wanted her to, I gave less of a shit. The test I didn't study for, the homework I didn't do, anything. It was my coping mechanism for all.
Anything stress related?
Anything.
Anything that brought you anxiety?
Anything.
Yeah.
Depression, anxiety, which are my two biggies. And so naturally it just progressed into other substances, as it does for a lot of us going into the later teen years, and the harder and heavier drugs. And it didn't really kick off or spike probably until I was in my I'd say around 20. 20 years old, I guess.
And where did that, if it did start with, marijuana, where did it end up leading to you when you do talk about hardcore drugs?
So I was drinking and all that with my friends on the weekend and the normal, I guess, social stuff. But in February of 2000, I was in a car accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down. And that was something that I thought I could deal with. Again, some of my own independent mindset was, Josh did this to himself. He was in the car, he was driving, nobody was on the road with him. Okay, I got this. Psychologically, the realness, though, was I am different from everybody now. And what I see now was, Josh at 15 years old already felt different, mentally from the rest of his circle of buddies. I didn't smoke weed like the rest of them. I didn't drink like the rest of them. And so after this accident, now not only was there this mental difference between me and my friends, and that just made me feel separate from. Now, post-accident, there was this obvious, in-your-face, glaring difference between me and 90 some odd % of the population. It felt like I couldn't go anywhere without people staring at the kid in the wheelchair. And so as a means to cope, substances were my best friend. And from there, however, that level of trauma, what I now recognize as trauma, weed, alcohol didn't do the trick anymore. That was still there. And so it just ramped up.
So did you continue to use after that accident?
Absolutely. I used in the hospital after that accident. Immediately. And it wasn't things like painkillers. Nothing like that. It was just a means to escape. I want to hammer down on this because I think one thing that I hear from a lot of parents sometimes is, why doesn't my child get it? Like, how do they not see that this is terrible? How do they not see that their behavior is bad? How about this? How come they don't think that that's their rock bottom? Because I'm sure, Josh, from the people on the outside looking in, you get into an accident, you're paralyzed from the waist down, right? Drinking or drugging. Yep.
People would look at you and be like, and you're still using. It's no different, Josh, than me on life support in Los Angeles at Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. Bleeding in my brain. Chief neurosurgeon says, we got to perform brain surgery on you tonight now that you're out of the coma. I'm like, you're not doing that. Unplugged myself from all the machines, walked out of that hospital with the hospital robe on, found my truck, and got high again.
Right.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But I think it's important to talk about, because where this is leading us is what we think is somebody's rock bottom may not be their rock bottom as it was for you.
No. I get from the outsider's perspective that I should have been a poster child for Mothers Against Drunk Driving and should have sworn off all substances and become a monk somewhere. But
for sure.
No, that's where my drug of choice is heroin and opiates. And it wasn't until a couple years after my accident that I used my first heroin. And when I found it, like coming home, nothing mattered. I didn't care what you thought of me. I felt safe. And what ended up being my rock bottom was just a moment of clarity, and a phone call from my father saying, hey, look, kid, it's either us or the drugs, but it won't be both. You have to decide. And like a good drug addict, I had to think about it for a little bit. I'll call you back. And, a moment of clarity, maybe 30 minutes of clarity. Okay, Dad, I need help. And half hour later, I was down at Calvary.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I tell my patients all the time, anytime I'm speaking, where I have a very shady gray area rock bottom. There's the typical, yep, that must be his rock bottom. But what got me in the door of recovery was something as simple as a phone call.
Yeah. It's really powerful. What this is reminding me of, because you're paralyzed from the waist down and you were involved in a car accident. There was a friend of mine from a long time ago, and he stole a cop car, and he drove it and crashed it, paralyzed from the waist down in Los Angeles. And it was never enough. He would get sober for a little bit of time, and then he would use in treatment or use at halfway house. He spent time in prison because of all the things that he did. His partner ended up dying because of his hands. He said self-defense. I don't even know if he's sober or not to today. And I tell people, some people are the message and some people get the message. It's a really hard thing to tell a parent, and I've said it to them. When a parent tells me, their child has been in and out, in and out, in and out, or they're out on the streets, and this mother called me last week. She says, I'm out here she says, I am messaging you on Facebook while I'm out searching the streets for my son. Helpless and hopeless.
Yeah.
So hardest bond to break is that of parent and child, to get the mom and dad to understand letting go could actually save their life, just as your parents were about to with you. That tough stance likely saved your life.
My advice to any families when I speak to them and they call and their loved one is struggling is, look, you have to expedite the pain. And it's easy for me to say, I'm not a parent. But speaking from my own personal experience, that phone call expedited the pain. It was either, okay, do I live without my family, or do I continue with, the drugs? And in that moment of clarity, it was like, okay, no, I'm done. And I think reality was I was done for a while, just didn't know how to be done. The fear of what it would take to get sober and what would sobriety be like was immense. And then the fear of living another day like that became greater than the fear of whatever sobriety is going to feel like. And so I think that opened me up momentarily, to seek help. And I'm a chronic relapser. There was many, 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 many relapses.
And you know what, Josh? It's okay.
It all played a part.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't care if you've got 10 years. I mean, I had... I don't share them. I don't know if your residents ever come back and tell you like the things I share with them inside our art class. Sometimes they do. Of course they do.
Of course they do. I know about the 7 hours in hell.
Yeah. Right. 7 hours of dark, you know? And it is true. 7 hours of dark, how a relapse saved my life. But here's the other thing, Josh. I can't sit here in front of you today and say I'm never going to relapse again. I would be fucking lying to you.
Neither can I.
Okay? Like lying. And I'm not just saying that just to say that.
No.
And I tell you, I always like every time, because, when we do, I should say this for those who are watching or listening, Calvary sends their residents over to Art of Our Soul. We do art healing once a week. So we don't just they don't walk in the door and we just throw some paint on a canvas. No. We do like a 15-minute. We get into it. We do like a good 20-minute warm-up session of just life and life perspective, things that I have learned, right? Things that I have gone through and things like that. But it's so funny because sometimes I'm like, now don't be telling all y'all's clinical directors and therapists some of the shit I'm saying in here, because it could go against the AA model or the grain on some things. They love it though, I think. And so I tell them, I'm like, listen, how many of y'all have experienced relapse? 100% of the hands are raised. Okay. And I'm like, okay, I don't care. As a matter of fact, there was a resident from Calvary. She was here in November, maybe part of December. And then, they graduate. And unfortunately, sadly, I'm sure like you start to bond with some of them. Like you wish them well, but, you have to break. And so they leave and then I don't see them. Well, 2 weeks ago, she walks in during Calvary. And I looked at her and I'm like, hey, you. She bows her head and goes, I messed up. And I was like, okay, seriously? Look at me. Get the chin off the ground. Look at me. I looked at her and I was like, welcome back. You think I care? I was like, do you honestly think I think less of you?
Right.
I don't care.
You're in the fight still.
Right. It doesn't matter. And here's the thing. I went like almost 13 years and I relapsed, right? Something happened, couldn't handle it, relapse for 7 hours, back after 7 hours.
Yeah.
Do I look at that and be like, I have to start over from day one? Hell no. It's why I don't count time anymore. Because it doesn't matter.
No.
My life today is amazing. I don't care how long ago that relapse was. Like, well, if I want to count time, a year and a half ago, it was like Thanksgiving of 2020. Who the fuck cares? Like, I tell people, I'm like, listen, if you're here today and you relapse next week and then you're back the next week, you didn't lose all the experience and the talks that we've had. Like, that still lives with you. We need to make mistakes in order to grow. This whole thing that our family who are addicts have to be perfect.
Yeah.
We cannot apply that pressure to them. They feel it. And I want the reaction when somebody does relapse from the general public to be like, okay, what's up? What do you need?
Yeah.
Like that nonchalant.
Yeah.
None of this like, oh my God, Brandon relapsed. What are we going to do? No, because that actually makes me feel more shame.
Absolutely.
And it makes me not want to say anything.
No. The only big I ask them, what'd you learn?
What'd you learn?
Because you're human. You will make mistakes.
Yes.
This will not be the last.
No.
But if you can learn something small even from what happened with that relapse, then suddenly those 2 days, 2 weeks you now have sober again, suddenly now outweigh all that 13 years you had before.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Because I tell people a year and a half after that relapse, I'm happier today than I was at year 13 collecting that medallion.
Right.
Okay, so what does that tell you? It tells you that the word continuous doesn't equal happiness.
It's progress, not perfection, right? Like
Correct.
They beat that into our heads.
Correct. So like, let's get away from the word continuous as a way to measure somebody's success.
Yeah.
I'm like, congratulations, you haven't picked up a drug or a drink in 15 years.
Sweet.
Okay, but how's your life?
Yeah.
Like, are you a good husband? Are you a good dad? Are you a good friend?
Yes.
Like what? Like sobriety is that.
Yeah.
It's all that. It's not just not picking up something continuously. It's so much more than that.
Are you a part of your community again?
Right.
Giving back and just.
And here's the thing. If you relapse, I want to let you know, you still have stuff to offer the world when you get sober again. Like don't beat yourself up. Nobody in the mental health world, I don't see it. If somebody relapses, they don't shame them. As a matter of fact, a majority of people who work in mental health are recovering addicts or they've suffered some sort of mental health. You think they stay perfect their whole lives? No. Do they still have something to offer? You're damn fucking right they do. As a matter of fact, they may have something more to offer this time around because they can identify.
They get impressed when I tell them, the days I've been clean and how many years, and I can't express it enough to them that the day's just great, yes, but I've been sober today. And in fact, anybody that's woken up earlier than I did today, I could argue you've got more sobriety than I do. And all we get is this one day.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. And if I were to relapse, and I absolutely have another one in me.
Right.
I hope not.
But maybe tomorrow you start off sober again and you're sober that next day.
Yeah. And that knowledge doesn't vanish.
No.
It's just a number.
It is just a number. And we need to stop. And that is based in ego anyway. The more of those medallions that we do, and then like, trust me, I used to do it, so I'm calling myself out. First off, okay,
Same.
I used to get like on the 5 years and the 10 years, I would get a really fancy medallion. It was it wasn't good enough just to go
with
to a
all
meeting
the diamonds,
to get them out. With like
yes.
a little diamond stud in it, and all that shit. And I was just like, dude, I went to a meeting one time, somewhat recently, and I just dumped all the medallions on the table. And they immediately got out a white chip. And I was like, yo, I did not relapse. I'm just simply cashing these in because these are my ego.
Yeah.
I have compared my length of sobriety to other people, if I'm being honest. And used to have the mentality like, if I have 13 years or 12 years or whatever, and you got 6 months, nah, I'm not even going to talk to you. Or you got 2 years, nah, you're not worth my time. Like seriously,
right.
You know, and I needed to go through that step in order to really understand. And I don't even ask people their length of time. You'll notice I've never asked you because I don't care. What I gain is the conversation that we have, and I can kind of judge like, okay, he's got some time, like the things he's speaking, the way he's sharing, and he's got experience, but like. I wouldn't want to know, because if you were to tell me you had 2 years or maybe you've got 15 or whatever it is, and I don't even want to allow myself for even a snap judgment to go like, what is he talking about? He's got 2 years.
Yeah.
No, see, I don't want to go down that route.
Right.
Okay, so eventually you get sober, and I think one of the beautiful things is that a lot of us, like we've been mentioning, is that, you know, if we're in recovery, a lot of us go and work in the mental health community.
Yeah.
I think there's a few reasons for that.
Yep.
And there's some benefits because I believe you're a therapist, though. Not all therapists are recovered addicts.
No.
A lot of the techs might be, you know, the chaperones, the house managers, those kind of people. It's not always therapists.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. Actually, I would say that in that one position in the treatment world, I would say majority are probably not.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the overall employees who work in treatment, I would say it's upwards of 90%.
Oh, yeah. Calvary's in the 90%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But therapists, it's not going to be that high.
No. Not usually. Maybe 50%.
Maybe. Yeah. Because, you know, people want to be a therapist and they go through a lot of training in order to take their perspective of life, their lens off and put on an addict's.
Sure.
However, there's no substitute for lived experience as an addict. Like, I could probably cut through to another addict faster than a therapist with no addiction treatment recovery can.
Hands down. I know my job. Okay, my job is to build rapport with a patient, and I'm just meeting you for the first time. I know that my job is 50% done by, hey, my name's Josh and I'm in recovery. Yes. I don't announce it like that, but I drop little seeds here and there that indicate, yes, I too know what it's like. And that, man, that is a luxury.
It's huge.
A luxury.
Because you get that immediate kind of,
they know what they know. I know.
Yes.
They just know.
And you're
I
not
know.
blowing smoke. Because nothing, I will say this, nothing. And, you know, a lot of parents need to learn this too. It's really important who talks to the addict, or even if it's the husband or it's the sister, whatever. It's really important who you have that conversation with.
Yeah.
Because trust me, from an addict's perspective, someone who doesn't get it tries to tell me to quit it. Nah, man, they ain't going to cut through.
Because it's hard to not. What I witness is, you know, the addict being spoken down to. And as an addict, I already think plenty down about myself. Totally. I don't need anybody's help with that. I am a professional with that. Even with this sobriety, I mean, that it is there.
In my head.
Yeah, the enemy. And so, yes.
Brandon, you piece of shit. Why are you thinking that?
Josh, how could you, goddammit? What's wrong with you?
Yes.
You're the worst. Nobody will love you.
I'm with you there.
I get it. And yes, there is a training, you know, and look, it's why PALS groups are phenomenal. Al-Anon, the Nar-Nons, any family programming. And I tell my patients this, look, the patients whose families actively engage in their own program of recovery, whatever that looks like, those patients, the addict has that much greater of a chance of success. And they still may relapse and be a chronic relapser, but the road is healthier, if you will, in some way, because there's healthy boundaries, there's healthy stated intentions of what family expects, addict expects. It's open communication.
Yeah.
And look, we all know communication is, you need that in order to be successful in any avenue. And if you want to get sober and in a household, open communication.
Yeah. You have to have that. Talk to me a little bit about what you all are doing at Calvary, like that experience of somebody who is going to residential, because you guys offer detox, right? Mm-hmm. Detox, next step would be residential, right? Get them from detox to residential, and then what, to PHP?
Right.
And then to IOP.
Correct.
Right, the kind of stages of treatment and addiction. It's really important to understand that 30 days doesn't cure all. Okay, that number was driven by insurance companies that just wanted to pay 30 days.
Yes, I hate that.
Life does not change after 30 days.
No,
we can begin the change.
Yes,
which is why there are different stages, right? So explain, like, you got sober at Calvary, and now you're helping people get sober at Calvary.
Yeah. My office is in the same room where my first lecture as a patient is, and so I can think back to February of 2006, sitting in that room, scared as shit, looking around at these other people in this room with me thinking, oh man, I might have overreacted here. Like, I don't belong with these people. And to think back to all the ups, downs, and in-betweens since there, and
Yeah.
to think that, oh shit, that's my name on that door for a good reason. And they pay me for it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's so cool. It's so cool to see people get sober at a place and then they end up going back there and working there. And what does that say?
They believe in their product.
That's what I mean. What does that say? There's nothing more true. Like, that's the perfect testimonial is not only did Josh get sober here at Calvary, he's also now a therapist at Calvary.
A lot of our staff have been through some level of care.
Some level
of care. And when I was a patient, when I got out, they didn't have an outpatient program yet. But I went to sober living. Probably hands down the next greatest decision I could have accidentally made. You know, besides going to treatment itself, going to sober living, man, that taught me how to be an individual, living in the community, and to operate functionally.
Yeah.
You know, pay my rent, do my chores,
the basics,
interact with other people.
The basics to the majority of the public, but to an addict who's mentally ill and who still suffers from mental health, those can be monumental things.
Huge. Yes.
I mean, like monumental. It's always fun to ask an addict. They're like, it's like a joke, but not a joke. They're like, dude, I have a car. I make my car payments.
Yeah. It's a miracle. I make my bed still. I still make my bed. And that started at Calvary.
I don't make my bed.
I didn't
Although
say
Oprah always says, if you make your bed, you've done one thing successful that day.
And Oprah would know.
Oprah would know.
I don't make
and
it
I'm
every
like,
day.
no, I leave my bed messy because my mother used to make me always make my bed. No, I make it when I know I'm having company over, and then I make it look like a hotel. Every part of my house looks like a hotel. It's very clean, very neat, very organized, very minimalist. But then like the bed is just like, yo, fuck you, I'm not making you today. I need to get back to making my bed. Okay, so as we close here, what is that? Because listen, we're still in a pandemic. I refuse to listen and watch the news as a former news anchor. I'm really proud of that. I am detoxing from news, so I should count. I don't have any problem.
Count those days.
I will count those days. I don't count my time in recovery because it means nothing to me. But I will count how many days I can stay clean off of fucking news. So I'm proud of that. I'm going to calculate that. We're still living in a pandemic. That I do know because I'll go to the grocery store and I see signs. So I know the virus is still out there, and then I'll get calls of like so and so is COVID. How do you think we navigate this with the mental health aspect? I know it's kind of a loaded question coming to the end, but how do we navigate this? How do we navigate this? Those who are suffering from mental health and dealing with addiction and COVID.
Look, it's harder now, right?
It's so much harder. There's so much relapse too, by the way.
I could not imagine trying to get sober over the last year and a half, 2 years, or whatever it's been since this thing started.
There's so much hopelessness.
When the meetings closed down, I would not have survived it having to do virtual meetings with 31 days sober.
No way.
Not even gonna happen.
Yeah.
And it's gotten better over the last year.
But not great.
Not great. You know, and one of the things I love about Calvary is they've opened up their alumni program in the last month.
That's recent.
Huge.
Super recent.
And it is doing phenomenal.
It is. That's good.
Every Thursday, 7 p.m., conference room, and they are so excited to be involved in that. And I think the idea is to eventually hand that over to them and let them run it, their own events, their own meetings, their own retreats, hopefully. Look, recovery is about community and fellowship. And how do you do that in a pandemic? It is very difficult, but not impossible. And look, so there are virtual meetings, and we do phone lists in our PHP program. And so we're, look, you guys need to reach out to each other. If you can't attend meetings together, just, hey, a phone call can go a long way.
Right.
Because you cannot do this alone. And so how do we do this in a pandemic? I mean, there's millions of people trying to figure that out right now that know a lot more than I do. But, we do it together, I guess, is the simplest answer I can think of.
And what I want people to know as we close, I want people to know this. It is a pandemic, and this is something that none of us have experienced. The opposite of addiction, as has been described to me, I did not come up with this, but I believe in it. It's been told to me the opposite of addiction is connection, as you were just alluding to. Mm-hmm. And so much of that has been taken away. if you are watching or listening right now and you have relapsed, or if you relapse today or you relapse tomorrow, just know this: who cares? It's okay. Give yourself a pass. Don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up. Just go, okay, I made it maybe a year and then I relapsed, but you know what? It's all good.
I've been to treatment with guys who have been sober since the day they walked in, to my buddies, my part of my fellowship. And, so they've got 10, 11, 12, 13 years
Right.
sober. And dude, fantastic. That's not my story though.
It's not mine either.
And I look at them like, how the hell did they do that? And I know they look at me like, well, why'd you relapse, Josh? Just
Right.
do what they fucking told you.
Yeah.
But even if they were to relapse tomorrow, I would not look at them any differently. Or
No.
I would not even stop reaching out to them for my own support.
You know what? I believe that part of my journey I was supposed to.
100%.
I just do.
I know that.
And I'm sure there's some old timers who will listen to me say that and say that's really irresponsible of you to say with the platform that I have, right? Because a lot of people do listen. I just do. I do from an empathetic standpoint. I do from a judgmental standpoint for me. I do from an ego standpoint. I do from a healing work standpoint, that I have to be able to look at people who have relapsed 15 to 17 times. It's fairly standard, if I'm being honest. And just sit there and go, okay, great. Okay, let's, what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah.
Okay. I needed to go through that in order to be like, yo, dude, this is not a fucking race that we're comparing each other to.
And I know the very dangerous statement of relapse is a part of recovery. And I know there's people out there that, oh my God, that
you know what
just
they say?
allows
Relapse doesn't have to be part of your story. But you know what? I'm with you. I'm like, okay, but it's a high majority of our stories. So can we just say relapse can be part of the journey?
NASCAR car racers go out there and they go to race, and if they wreck, they wreck. And there's people that say, rubbing or wrecking is a part of racing. I guarantee those guys aren't at the starting line thinking, fuck it, if I wreck, But if they do, they do.
They do. And how oftentimes do they get back in the car?
And they're on next week, turning left a lot of times.
Thank you. So I'm with you, man. I'm with you talking about relapse the exact same way, man.
Yeah.
We just have to be just open and converse about it, because it just makes it easier for somebody to say, hey, I did.
Love yourself enough to be able to get back into the fight, because it's
so
much easier to just
give up. And you still have value, and you can still contribute to society in major ways.
Somebody else out there right now that is homeless, whatever, just in the dirt, they need you. And your story's not over yet.
No.
And your experience with that relapse could save that person's life.
1000%. Josh, man, great conversation.
Appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you coming here. Congrats on your recovery.
Thank
I'm
you,
glad
you
you're
too.
over at Calvary. If you want more information about Calvary Healing Center, we have provided all that information at the bottom of this episode. Calvary Healing Center right here in Phoenix, Arizona. Look them up on Google. Give you all the numbers and the website as well. We'll see you back here for the next episode.